I do still see the "you're in a practice session" message. Hello, welcome to everybody coming into the virtual library now. We'll get started in a couple minutes, so please feel free to make yourself comfortable. Good morning to everyone just joining us. We're going to start in a minute or so, so please make yourself comfortable. All right, good morning from the San Francisco Public Library Main Library and Civic Center. My name is Kelsey, and I'm a librarian in the Magazines and Newspaper Center. I'm joined by my colleagues Kirsty and Lori, who will help ensure a smooth running of this program on Zoom and YouTube. Today, we welcome Print Princess Kelsey Russell to the SFPL Virtual Library. Kelsey has made her name for herself as the media literate hottie and has amassed over 100,000 followers on TikTok, where she posts videos of herself reading the print newspaper. But before we start chatting with our special guest today, a few words about who we are and what we do. The Magazines and Newspaper Center on the fifth floor of the main library preserves and provides access to thousands of periodicals, including over 200 current magazines in our reading room, a dozen daily newspapers, hundreds of historical bound magazines, and of course, we help library users access hundreds more periodicals digitally through the online platforms Flipster and PressReader, amongst other databases. Now we are sharing the webpage for the Magazines and Newspaper Center in the chat, where you can get links to our e-mags and e-news resources, read our blog, and find out about our upcoming programs. Even though the focus of the program today is the print newspaper, we want you to know about the digital access we provide as well. Today we'll be talking about the New York Times and two local community newspapers. San Francisco Public Library provides access to the New York Times, the daily paper, the website, and the complete historical back file online in a database, all the way back to its start in the 19th century. To our patrons, all you need is a SFPL library card. The other two publications that we'll talk about, the San Quentin News and the CCWF Paper Trail, are usually available for free on our community newspaper shelf here in the main library on the fifth floor. Now, I would like to pause and acknowledge that SFPL sits on the unceded territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples. We put our full land acknowledgement in the chat, so I encourage you to take a look. And you can also use land lookup tools to find out whose native land you're on right now. Okay, on to the main event. Today, we will get to know our guest, Kelsey Russell, and hear her read from a selection of articles. And then at the end of our program, we will have time for questions from the audience. Kelsey Russell is a media literacy influencer of TikTok fame and the co-host of First Stop News, a YouTube show about news for tweens and teens. She holds an MA degree in sociology and education from Columbia University's Teachers College and a BA degree in sociology from Boston University. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you, Kelsey. I love talking to any other Kelsey.
Yeah, we have a good name, so we have that in common already. And just to make sure people don't get confused, we have a different spelling for each of us. So yeah, so great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to talk to you. So let's just take it from the very beginning. Tell us about the first time that you got the print New York Times subscription. And, I heard it was gifted to you by a family member. And then tell us what it was like starting to read the print newspaper on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I have to say, I think I had a subscription before when I was younger, but it was a family
Hmm.
subscription. I grew up reading the Atlanta Journal-Constitution pretty much every morning from the time I was little until I could drive to school myself. I would really only read the lifestyle and the comic section though. And then when I had Boston for college, my dad would send me clippings of the New York Times and I would just save them. I would never read them, but he's a huge New York Times fan. Moved to New York to start my journey in graduate school at Columbia, and I just found myself knowing a lot about sociology, a lot about education, a little bit about policy, which was what I was studying. But when things like war, politics, just conflicts going on across the world, or even triumphs, I didn't know how to add to the conversation. I wasn't confident in my media diet to say, I know what's going on over here. I know the
Mhm.
politician you're talking about, which I always say is really odd for me because I'm an extrovert and I love to talk. So not having something to say was an icky feeling. So I decided I'm going to go back to the way that I used to consume news, which was print growing up. And prior to that decision, I had been growing a following on TikTok of about 40,000 people for what's known as lifestyle content. That's just content of daily vlogs, what's going on, what was my experience like going to Boston University. So I just put the camera down and said, "Oh my gosh, guys, guess what I learned at the New York Times?" And it completely took off. So, long story to answer your one question of what was that like? It was refreshing to consume news in a way that didn't feel draining and extremely negative, like the way that I have consumed it on my phone. It felt freeing too, because I realized how much of the news I consume was built by an algorithm that I had kind of created on my phone. And it also felt exciting. Like for the first time, it's like, oh my gosh, this is really cool what's going on in the world. So those are all the feelings that I had. And obviously, I had to take that excitement to my audience.
Right. Oh, cool. I didn't even know that you already had like a pretty substantial following before you went into reading the news. Yeah, because there's something so different about reading a print newspaper because you see everything presented to you in a layout, whereas when you're
Yeah.
reading online, like you say, there's the algorithm, or if you're on the New York Times website, you get to kind of pick and your interests guide you, and you're like, okay, what am I going to click on? But when you have everything laid out in a graphic, package, then it's a completely different experience. So we have some questions about TikTok and why you chose TikTok to begin with, but I'm going to bring Lori in because Lori is a little bit more well versed in what TikTok means and stuff. So she has some questions for you about TikTok specifically.
Sure.
Hi, Kelsey. How are you today?
I'm
Thanks
doing
for
well.
thanks for coming in. This is great. I have some questions about TikTok. Why did you choose TikTok as a platform over other social media options to share your information about news?
Yeah, so I think one, I already had a following on there, so it just kind of made sense to go where the following was. But also because I know I was consuming a lot of my news on TikTok, and oftentimes I would find myself asking, is this credible? Is this
Mhm.
real? I would find myself saying I saw this somewhere and not saying I saw it on TikTok, because if you see it on TikTok, okay, who's the creator? Where are they getting this information from? So I think as I've been on TikTok, I've realized what it has provided for me and my audience is a space where they can say, okay, I watched this girl named Kelsey read the news, and I know she's reading it from a credible source because she talks about the source. She talks about what it looks like for a source to be credible, for it not to be credible. And I think it's important to meet people where they are. I mean, TikTok and YouTube are young people's most favorite apps. It's what they're spending the most time on. So I think it also offered a way for an old form of media, which still exists, is print, to find its way into an app where there are a lot of younger people that the print industry has been worried about. How do we reach them? How do we care about them? So a little bit of convenience, but also meeting people where they are. And that algorithm is, there's something different about it that keeps you
Yeah.
hooked. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's kind of nasty when you think about
Yeah, that algorithm is kind of amazing, but also terrifying.
it. Right, right, exactly, exactly.
Um, can I ask, I'm a big TikTok news follower as well. Who is your favorite TikTok journalist?
Oh, I mean, Under the Desk is like one of the best ones. I
I
mean,
love that one.
yeah, just a solid one. There is another person I follow, I believe her name is Marion, and she kind of does something similar to me where every single like thing she just comes across, she focuses less on print and just magazine articles, podcasts, and she does a little bit of analysis of it. I have to say, if I'm gonna get news, I like my news just blanket. Like, give me the facts, give me like a Reuters, like a AP. I love to see people analyze the news and bring in their own spin to it. But Under the Desk is just like you can't go wrong. You can't go
Yeah,
wrong.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Um, so sadly, we are coming up to this April 5th deadline for another possible TikTok ban.
Yeah.
Um, what's your plan? If TikTok is banned, how will that affect what you do?
Well, as I tell every influencer, I actually have updated my resume, which in the world of influencing is absolutely wild. Like, I don't meet that many influencers with a resume. So I think I'm doing a couple different things. One, working on longer form projects and seeing how those can fit on YouTube and also Twitch, like meeting people where they are for live stream audiences, because I've had an asking from my audience if we want to see you similar to what I'm going to do here. We want to see you read the newspaper. We want to see how you annotate, come up with those thoughts. So that's one realm. But also, I have learned so much from this journey of being on TikTok that I still want to go back to school. I still want to get my PhD. I want to be a college professor. None of that has changed. I just kind of see this as a little detour in that process. So, still continuing my life plan of applying to get my PhD and really now having an interest in studying how can print be a way to solve this media literacy crisis that we're in. So the plan is just to keep on living life, but also prepare my content in different ways for basically different platforms.
All right, it's good to hear that you have a good plan. So I'm excited because I don't want to be able to not watch you on TikTok anymore. So I'll be able to look at you follow you somewhere else.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
one thing I am really interested in when I look at influencers on social media is who their audience is and if their audience is the same or different than what they imagine their audience to be when they started this. So tell us about your audience, who follows you and what is different or surprising than you expected?
Yeah. So my audience, the primary age is 18 to 34. I think the thing about TikTok, I will never know if there are people below age 18 or 16 watching my stuff because they're obviously lying about their age on the app. Or they might be using an older sister, or I mean, a sibling, a friend, or a parent's account. But I do know from the statistics, most people are 18 to 34 watching my content. I also have a following of folks that are in their 50s to 60s, which is really interesting to see. And I didn't expect my content to reach them, but now that I do, I'm like, oh, of course, they're on this app. I mean, if you're 50 or 60 years old, you might not be that familiar with TikTok. So if you open it up and you see somebody like me, especially a young Black girl reading a newspaper, it's intriguing. And also, I'm literally holding something that brings up nostalgia, that makes them question, oh my gosh, young people still read the news. So that's a chunk of my following that are some of my most loyal followers too. They also give the most critique in the comments. It's my 50 to 60-year-old audience and 60 plus. And I would say my content primarily when I was making lifestyle content was more interesting, I could probably say for people who were pre-college age or in college, but my audience has grown with me. So I'm currently 24, so people in their mid 20s. I've also seen an influx of people in their early 30s, especially because what I'm learning is that is a part of a generation where they still did newspaper reports in school. So my audience is people who have this nostalgic component of the newspaper and love to see it, love to hear the actual crinkle of the paper. I have a part of my audience who is educators and are very interested in how can I bring in newspapers to my classroom. I have a younger audience that feels it's refreshing for somebody to see talk about news in an exciting way. And my audience is heavily identifies as female. That is something that I've always noticed, and a lot of content creators in the educational space have the same statistics. So I really hope that that can change because it's important for everybody to seek out good news and education.
Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you. And I have one final question for you. Content creators are often bombarded with negative comments and negative interactions, which is awful. I feel so bad when I see those on people's videos. But there are also great positive connections and interactions. So tell me about a great positive connection or interaction that you've had from one of your TikToks.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I can tell you one. So I actually I think being a content creator, influencer, I can get in my head a lot. I can't speak for everyone, but it is, life things happen in life where I'm not able to make a video for a couple weeks or I'm really tired. I have other things going on. And so, it had been like maybe about 3 weeks since I posted a video, and I was sitting with my line sister, who's my sorority sister, which is what we call sorority sisters in Black sororities. And I was telling her how much I was in my head. I was like, I just feel like I can't get this content out. I haven't seen something that sparks my mind naturally. And she's like, sister, it's okay, it's gonna happen. And we were walking down Frederick Douglass or 8th Ave in New York. And this young, like, black high school girl stops me. She's like, "Oh my God, I was just watching your TikTok," and flips the thing around, the phone. It was like, "I love your TikToks. Like, thank you so much for making them." So that was one of the most positive interactions I've had this year, just in a moment of doubt. And especially just with the current political climate, like, how do I use my platform? Like, what is the purpose of this? Especially because I'm not a news authority. I don't desire to really be the one to say something about politics or policy. I just want to reinvigorate people's love of learning. It made me so happy to see this young person like sit there and watch an 8-minute video of me talking about the, stratification of like Ivy League schools and some of the imbalances they're causing. So that was a really positive interaction. Anything that happens in person is so cool to actually see what my audience looks like IRL in real life.
Wow, you're like a local celebrity. People are like recognizing you on the street. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
It is. It is. It's super cool, especially because I just read the newspapers. So that's cool to be known. It's cool to be known for that and something that's like not, too bad or too personal either.
hmm Well, yeah,
Yeah.
so speaking of your followers and what you're reading to them, is there any like particular news piece that you read that really got a response from your followers and you were like, whoa, I didn't expect them to like be so into that news story? Like maybe what you could
Yeah.
tell us what the news story was?
Sure. I mean, I think one that always this one that I did about Monopoly and how the game Monopoly was actually created by a woman and somebody like completely took the idea from her. That sparks a lot. I think when it's something that people are familiar with and get an unknown fact about. I will have to say the one that I actually just mentioned, The Atlantic had an article about how Ivy League schools are the new caste system.
hmm
And that one did a lot better than I thought. But it also did really well with people who are currently, I had a lot of high schoolers that like that content, and they were in the comments able to talk about some of the pressures that they feel about applying to schools, not getting into schools, how they feel like, yeah, some people who graduated from Ivy Leagues like myself and are like, yeah, they have some problems there. So that piece surprised me. I mean, anything that does well surprises me because the things that I think are going to do well don't. And then the things that I don't think are going to do well do. So it always is a surprise when something goes viral, even though I've been doing this for almost like making TikToks at this point for almost 5 years almost.
It's like the magic of the algorithm black box or whatever, right? It's like you don't really
Right.
know how it's going to spin it off, but it does or whatever.
Exactly. You never know. You never know.
So let's talk about print versus online. We already talked about it a little bit, but so for you, why print
Yeah.
versus online? And you had told me something a little bit earlier about how it makes it more possible for emotional regulation when you're reading print. So tell us about that.
Sure. So, I mean, I also feel like there's this other piece of why I started reading print that has to do with the emotional regulation. So, I mean, it's not news that Gen Z is super anxious. It's not, this is not, well, it might be groundbreaking for some. Everybody's anxious, but Gen Z is like super, super anxious. And I was just like being in therapy, being open about my journey. I showed up to therapy one day, like, I've been in this for a year and a half. I think I'm ready to like do it, like actually show up and participate instead of just talking. And the first thing my therapist suggested was like, you really like, I need you to think about little Kelsey. Like, what did little Kelsey love to do? And I love to sit in the library, and I did. I was not interested in fiction books. I was not interested in like autobiography. I love the almanacs and I love Guinness Book of World Records. I just love collecting information. I like having a fun fact in my back pocket, as they call it. And, I thought to myself, like, she was like, maybe you should order some almanacs. I looked up the price of almanacs and Guinness Book of World Records. I was like, I'm not getting those. But then my 23rd birthday was coming up, and I'd been trying to ask for more substantial and like long-term things. I was like, I'm going to ask for a newspaper subscription. And I did. And I found that in the way when I would consume news on my social media, I would feel bad. I would feel bad because it made me feel sad about what was going on. I felt bad because I didn't want to interact with it. I would see things about genocide. I would see things about, sexual assault, everything, and not want to interact with it, which made me feel like a bad patron of society. Um, and when I read it in the news, I realized maybe it's not the information that's daunting, it's the way it's being presented to me. The fact that I can read this in a safe space like my home, or whether that's in the park, when it's overwhelming, I can put it down, I can rip it up, I can call my friend and be like, this is crazy that I just read. So it made me realize that print in a Gen Z way, I didn't know people took time to like do things, right? In this
Mhm.
super, super fast-paced world, it allowed me to slow down and consume the good and the bad. So that's one thing. And then also, I just think it's really important to know what's going on, but I don't think you have to know everything that's
Mhm.
going on in
Mhm.
the world. Like that's when we become overwhelmed and we become anxious and we don't know what to do with that anxiety. So we make kind of bad decisions for our own bodies and mental. So I found that when I read print, I just took the time to process. I also took the time to be like, okay, it takes money, effort, and to print these things, right?
Mhm.
Which means that
Mhm.
it's typically coming from, it made me want to do more research about the corporation. It made me want to be like, who's writing this news? Like, why did, I don't know, like an author here, why did Andy Newman, like, who is Andy Newman? Why is he working? Where did he work before? So it just made me want to process and investigate the things I was reading more versus than just looking at them, which is pretty much what I was doing, consuming news on social media. And I still consume news on social media because I have a social media, but I'm not consuming it. I'm just looking at it versus here, I'm like, it's a part of my diet, as I say. Long answer, I think.
No, it's great. I'm so happy that you mentioned that and you're so honest about your mental health journey and like being in therapy and then how emotionally manipulated you can get by reading news online. And also, I love that you said it's not our responsibility to know everything happening in the world because then we'll shut down and then we can't take action or whatever. So I love the idea of information diets. And if you have something in print, it's easier to like enforce that diet for yourself and not just keep watching the next reel or clicking on the next link or whatever. So I love that it's so intimately connected with mental wellness too. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so I think now it's time for us to actually hear you read from the news. So tell us,
Uh,
what have you selected today? What are you going to share with us? And then yeah, we'd love to hear your about your process of annotating and also hear the news itself.
Sure. So what I've decided to do is I actually already picked an article from the New York Times. This is a physical one I'm going to read. It's already pre-annotated and everything. So I think what I'm planning on doing is almost showing you all how it would make a TikTok, like what this process looks like after I've read it. And then I also have two other digital newspapers that I'm going to share and kind of go over some media literacy skills of when you first see a paper, what are some things you should look for. And then I'll do a live reading of another digital source if that's good with you all.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So this first article is one that really caught my eye in the New York Times, and it was from the New York Times National section of Wednesday, February 26, 2025. And I am a food delivery consumer. And as a food delivery consumer, if you do, you better tip people in cash. Because what I learned is that delivery app is told to pay $16.8 million to its drivers, and this is DoorDash Poached Tips in New York, and it's actually by Andy Newman, who I just brought up. So as you all can see, just to kind of give you like a brief way, the way that I annotate these articles is I'll just give it a good read first, like a natural read. And I'm usually looking for 2 to 3 things if I decide to annotate an article and share it with my audience. The first thing is selfishly self-interest. Like if it doesn't naturally interest me, I'm not going to be excited to talk about. So that's the first thing. The next thing I'm looking for is it's a topic that is, I assume that the general public either has experience with or knows about. I think we're in an age now where lots of people use an Uber Eats, a DoorDash, a Postmates. The idea of a third party app delivering food is either something we've all experienced or maybe you know somebody who uses. And then the third thing is I'm looking for an element that kind of gotcha, like, oh, I didn't know that DoorDash didn't tip people, or I didn't know that they were holding their tips. And that part is more so for the social interaction part, because as an influencer and content creator, your first 3 to 5 seconds of your video is really all that's going to make the black box algorithm go. So that's why I selected this article. And then from this article, if you see, I've kind of written numbers like 1, 2, and then 3. Shout out to my ninth, 10th, and 11th grade history teacher, no, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade teacher, Miss Wilson, who taught me about 3 key points when reading. So whenever you read something, no matter how short or long, you want to identify the 3 things, 3 sentences that summarize what those 3 key points are. So my first key point from this is that DoorDash came up with a novel way to process tips, and that's that customers gave to workers. It effectively kept the money for itself. So the article starts off saying like, DoorDash had this brand new way of giving tips to drivers, meaning they just kept tips to themselves. And so then in my article, what I'll do is I always circle dates. I always circle dates, places, and names. So that is an annotation tip of whatever you decide is your annotation guide and key, that is your key. So for me, I circle names, dates, and places. But for other people, if you underline names, always underline names. Don't leave underlining for anything else because it helps your hands and your brain and also your mind know exactly what you're looking for when you go back. So the first date I have circled here is 2019. So quote, in 2019, DoorDash halted, hold on, like if I was making a TikTok, this is where I will pause and be like, what am I trying to say? So basically what it's talking about is that this practice of DoorDash holding tips happened for 2 years, and then in 2019 they halted that service. And they created a new service for tips. And so then the article goes to, as I circled, on Monday, which is a day, a date. Quote, on Monday, the New York Attorney General's office announced that DoorDash would pay 16.8 million in restitution to Dashers. Also, this word restitution, that is something that I oftentimes would define to my audience because I think I know what restitution is, but I like to assume that the country is on the average reading level, which is about a middle school level. And I don't think when I was in 6th grade, I knew what restitution meant. So I would typically go to my computer, go on Webster Dictionary, look up what restitution meant, and share with them what that means. Um, and then read the our definition and then say it in the way that I would say it to like my niece. So just as a tip, because we never want to assume what people know. Um, and so then the next point is that, okay, so what's going to happen to the money? I would ask my audience, like, all right, so what's going to happen to this money? How is it going to be divided? And the article says, quote, the money will be spread among as many as 63,000 workers. And though many will receive amounts with the low thousands, some will receive as much as $14,000. And this actually is coming from an attorney general, Latita James. So whenever there is information or a quote, I always make sure to tell my audience where I'm getting that information. Um where did this journalist Andy Newman get this information from? And I do that because oftentimes when I consume news on social media, I'm never actually clicking the links of where it is going to take me. I am just reading. So it's good for people who are watching videos to know how many voices have to come into a proper journalist written source for it to be credible. So I'm gonna pause there and I just want to like make sure if there's any questions or anything, because I realize I might be talking kind of fast too.
Yeah, no, you're great, but yeah, let's see. I think there's a couple questions. Um, Well, speaking of specifically your process of putting your content on TikTok, someone has asked us in the Q&A, how long does it usually take you to prepare for every TikTok video? And this person comments that you look so natural and improvised, but she's sure that you take a lot of prep to and rehearsing to get it. So, you kind of showed us what you would do, but like, are you practicing before you actually start your camera rolling for your TikTok?
Oh yeah, I take really long showers and I practice all my jokes. Like, and actually I'm moving from New York and I promised myself I have to do stand up before I leave. But yeah, no, I listen, I read the articles and then I annotate and then I think in my mind, like, for example, this DoorDash one of they would have to pay $16.8 million dollars and the money would be spread among 63,000 workers. I'm already thinking to myself, like, that ain't no money. Like, that's not
Yeah.
generating money, right? So I'm like, that's cool that they went to court, but like, what are they gonna get? Like a thou wow? Like I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's a moment to include a joke. So literally, the person who just asks, like, yeah, after I annotate, I probably do this at night and I get in the shower, like, okay, I kind of practice it out loud. I say it out loud, what would land with me, what I think is funny. So while it is improv, it's not as much. And then the process, I think in total for me to like really do one article probably takes about like an hour and a half to 2 hours in terms
Okay.
of annotating and then the kind of talking it out, the writing, taking notes in another notebook I have, and then the actual filming and editing of it.
Hmm. Cool. Thank you for explaining kind of like, yeah, what goes on behind the scenes. But this person also asked another question, which is good. So this story that you just read is from the
Yeah,
national section of the New York Times.
yeah,
So this person is also asking, do you have more interest in local news versus national news, or like what guides
yeah.
you when you're thinking about like how local or more a widespread impact for the things that you pick?
Yeah. I think for me it just kind of depends like what I say is in my media diet. I obviously will always favor local media. Like
Hmm.
that's just because I even use for my audience the example, you know, I'm a big Desperate Housewife fan. I'm also a big Modern Family fan. I'm a big sitcom fan. And I always tell my audience there's reasons that certain sitcoms like a Friends are so successful and it's because you can see parts of yourself in every character,
Hmm.
right? Like, or you identify so strongly with a character, or a character identifies strongly with somebody that you can't stand. And that's kind of what local, I always use the analogy that like you want to think of local media doing that, right? It gives people representation of things that they're experiencing. Like to me, this stoplight right here might not be a big deal being out, but for somebody who lives right across the street, it can heavily impact the noise that they're hearing. It can cause
Hmm.
more crashes. They can have a grandma that crosses the street at the same time every day and relies on that light working.
Hmm.
Um, so I think for me, local media is one of the best ways to relay to my audience what has happened in the news industry. And what happens when you take local media away is that
Hmm.
people don't feel heard. And when
Hmm.
people don't feel heard, you get angry and you're gonna really want to um support people and vote for people who validate that anger with you.
Mhm.
So I love local media to describe the importance of journalism to my audience. And I also love national news for sometimes like the sensationalist aspect of social media, right? Like, unfortunately, a hashtag DoorDash, a hashtag,
Mhm.
lawsuit is going to pull a bigger audience. So I think for my socials, both have a purpose, but I always will prefer local news because it's also juicy. Like that's
Yeah,
what all gossip is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, have you ever read an article about a local school board meeting and
Oh yeah.
everything that happened? Oh yeah.
The straight up drama, right?
It's drama. It's drama. So, yeah, I prefer local news, and that's probably my favorite thing that my career is led. Sorry, I'm like reading and also talking to you all. But that's my favorite thing that my career has done is like everywhere I go now, I'm like, where is the local paper? Like I need it. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's a great segue to the next publication that you've picked to read from,
yes,
or if you're ready to move on from the New York Times.
yeah. I'm ready to move on from them. Like, let's go local.
Yeah, so, well, I'll say when Kelsey and I were preparing for this, she mentioned the San Quentin News, which
Yes.
is a newspaper coming out of San Quentin prison here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so
Mhm.
we have this newspaper in the magazines and newspaper center on our free community shelf here on the fifth floor of the main library. And we tried to express mail a copy of this to Kelsey, but the USPS did not come through for us, unfortunately. But she has a digital copy of it. So like we have to break a little bit from reading the print, but yeah, so this is one of the ones. And then I'll just say really quickly too, I am really interested in women's prison newspapers, and I opened up the San Quentin News to send this to Kelsey the other day, and I found a new one that was inside of it, the CC uh, WF Paper Trail, which is a new newspaper coming out of the Chowchilla Women's Prison in Central California. So that was like a fun discovery. But yeah, Kelsey, so I'll let you take it away for what you want to read to us from that.
Sure, sure. So I mean, when Kelsey sent me this Valentine's Day article, I mean, I was all eyes, I guess no ears, because I didn't I was gonna say all eyes and ears, but this is writing. So I was trying to put this full screen, but you guys can see it, right?
It looks pretty good, actually.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it looks really good.
Um, So this is a Happy Valentine's Day article, and is actually talking about the studies of incarcerated marriages. And I think the best part that Kelsey and I discussed is that, especially with local and community news sources, you are hearing the stories from the people in the community. And I wanted to make a distinction between that and what I just read with the DoorDash article, right? Because even though I didn't get through it fully, I read it fully, and I think we only hear one voice from somebody who actually is a Door Dasher. So it leaves questions of who is actually going to be impacted. I had questions of that article like, how are the people going to get the money? I mean, here in New York, there's a huge language barrier amongst even the people receiving food and then people who are delivering it. So how are they going to know to get this money? So I love the fact that this article is coming straight from the folks who are incarcerated. And the first thing I want to point out, and a part of media literacy that I think is missed as we get to adults, is how papers make us feel. Like, the colors that we see, how the illustrations make us feel. And so I would love if you all want to drop in the chat just, what do the colors of this remind you of? What do the families remind you of? And then does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel sad? Because that is an extremely important part of media literacy. It's just, I mean, if something's inviting, if it's disinviting, how do we feel about that? So I love this because it automatically caught my eye. Um, so let's kind of take a look at, I'm gonna read this like actually verbatim because sometimes I do read things out loud, and kind of give my natural reactions as I go along. All right, so prison puts a special pressure on the survival of marriage. I absolutely bet. But for some couples, they have managed to stay together despite being separated by prison bars. I'm very excited to get into this. All right. On June 1st, 1987, the United States Supreme Court established that marriage is a right for those serving terms in prison. Look at our Supreme Court doing something. Thank you. Since that time, many couples have taken their vows inside penal institutions. However, a recent study conducted by the Florida State University College of Criminology and Criminal Justice concluded that when one spouse is incarcerated, even for a brief time, the marriage is more likely to end in divorce. That's when I would tell my audience to, that's a good statistic. Like, we need statistics from actual universities and colleges are great, great, great sources. Every year of a prison term increases the odds that the marriage will end in divorce, a study said. The odds of separation increased by 32% during incarceration and after release. The study reported that spouses believed their marriages were less loving and more violent after incarceration than before, which I was telling my audience, that would also lead me to have questions about if the point of incarceration is rehabilitation, if this is what a lot of marriages are experiencing after, are we even rehabilitating people? Which I think we all know the answer to, given the current prison system. But that's a question that I will pose to my audience to hopefully answer in the comments. The study did not take account the antisocial behavior that preceded the spouse's imprisonment, and as if imprisonment were the sole source of marital conflict. Perry Shaw, formerly incarcerated at the California Healthcare Facility in Stockton, married Chantel Shaw on November of 2007. Shaw was released in 2003 after his conviction was overturned on appeal. During a phone interview, Perry and Chantel talked about how and why their marriage survived incarceration. I actually feel that my husband getting locked up made us closer, says Mrs. Shaw. The removal of all our day to day distractions and our singular focus on getting him home made me feel like we were teammates in a way I didn't feel before. I love that. That's beautiful. I also they didn't say who is each one in the pictures, did they?
No, that's like one shortcoming of it because it would be great to actually have a visual of these people that they interviewed, but we can imagine, I guess.
Right? We can imagine. I love it. I love it. Um, she added that she felt her husband's imprisonment exposed a level of vulnerability inside him that she did not know existed. She said this allowed her to open up more and present parts of herself that were hidden behind a cloak of feminine bravado. Love that. Perry Shaw affirmed the sentiments of his wife regarding the strength of their marriage. If my wife and I bumped heads on something, there was no marriage counseling available to us at the prison. Thought that would be great for prisons to offer that. Okay. We had to talk it out. We had to communicate, said Shaw. There's no lifers group to teach you about how to be a good husband. We found our strength surviving adversity together. And now, a year after my release, we are stronger than ever. One aspect of incarcerated marriages the Florida study fails to address is when a free person decides to marry a person serving a prison term. San Quentin resident Abadiel Guerrero is 8 years into a life sentence. He married his companion of 4 years earlier this year. Guerrero met his wife while in the Alameda County Jail litigating his current life sentence. Before we got married, I asked my girl why she would want to marry me, considering my situation. I was moved to hear that she saw the steps I was actively taking to correct the mindset that led to my life sentence, and she felt that my efforts to become a better person separated me from other potential suitors in the free world. Um, do you want me to keep reading this one, or do you want me to go to the next one, or like give some comments? How are we
Um,
feeling?
Maybe read a little bit more just because like
Yeah.
I love the quotes from them because like well if I could annotate for a second like it's so easy to judge people from the outside and be like,
Yeah.
girl, like why are you getting with the guy who's in jail? But then her points, it's like you can't argue with how someone feels and their viewpoint. And so we get that even if we disagree or we wouldn't do that for ourselves, we get the pure, form of her viewpoint in her quote. So I think there's a little bit more if you want to read a little bit more.
I'll keep reading. And I think on that note of annotation, it also makes me think about how much our current prison system shapes the way people think about loving somebody who is in prison, right? Like if it is an extremely violent place for folks and it's not actually helping any type of action or emotional intelligence, it also carries a stigma, while somebody actually might have the opportunity to grow. So it made me think of that too.
Yeah, and there's like one part, well, maybe you'll get to it where they say, I speak with my girlfriend or my wife on the phone for 1 to 3 hours every day. And I'm like, a lot of married couples probably don't even speak that much, you know? So that's like a huge level of communication and commitment to a person.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'm gonna keep reading. I'm into it. All right. Guerrero said that he and his wife talk on the phone 1 to 3 hours a day, a high level of interpersonal communication. Very much, very much. He said that he can instantly tell his wife's mood based on the tone of her voice. The Russell Sage Foundation produced a study saying that men in prison have about a 50% divorce rate, roughly the same for a public at large. That's very interesting. When I was on the street, the communication in my prior relationships was super different. We may have had 10 to 15 minutes a day of actual face to face conversation. We didn't talk on the phone at all. Does texting count? I would say no. Like, I would definitely say no. I don't even like texting if I'm dating somebody. Um, a Pew Research study said that the divorce rate of the incarcerated population drops dramatically when one or both spouses practice a religion faithfully. Incarcerated Protestants have the highest divorce rate at 19%, while Hindus and Muslims have the lowest divorce rates at 5%, respectively. Sammy Nichols practices Islam and is serving multiple life sentences. He has been with his girlfriend for 6 years before they married 3 years ago. Nicholas has been incarcerated for 16 years. My faith governs my life, and it teaches me that my wife is 50% of my very existence. She is the one that gives me balance, with Islam as our foundation, keeping us rooted in truth. His wife Portia said in a phone interview that she had to ask herself if she was willing to share a life with Sammy, considering his being his I was really getting into the story. Willing to share life with Sammy, considering his being sentenced to life in prison. She said she initially intended to be his friend, but the quality and depth of Sammy's humanity overwhelmed her, she said. After getting to know him and connecting through letters, phone calls, and visits, he began to show me what real love is, Mrs. Nichols said. He showed me how to love as well as what it was like to be loved by a man. Portia Nichols added that she has had a front row seat to her husband's transformation and daily growth into manhood. According to Lifer Support Alliance in parole board hearings, the board members look at the strength of incarcerated marriages as a factor in determining if the subject is likely to succeed after release. In some cases, a committed and supportive spouse could be weigh heavily in determining if someone is suitable for release.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you finished reading that. It's like so
Yeah.
moving because, man, it's like we were kind of talking about this before we went live, but when you read about news from incarcerated individuals in, the San Francisco Chronicle, the New York Times, or these more mainstream publications, a lot of it's very negative, which is important because, we need to know the bad aspects. But this is so full of joy. It's literally full of love. It's a story of rehabilitation. It's stories
Yes.
of people finding life on the other side after being imprisoned. And so that's like something that's so unique from the viewpoint of this newspaper.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, it has my mind going on a couple things of one, like nobody should ever be deprived of human connection. And ultimately, the only way to become a better person is to rely and speak to other people. It can't be a solo journey. So I really like this story as well, and just the importance of like love overall, right? So,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, this is just, I'm really happy you had me read this one. And I think you might have given me my next idea for my next TikTok, especially because these are coming in the mail.
Yay, cool. Yeah. So I will say this is the most recent issue
Yeah,
of the San Quentin News that we have here. I don't know if they made a March issue, but Valentine's Day is my favorite holiday, so I'm happy to like time travel back to last month so that we could experiences. Love makes the world go round. We could be a little bit cheesy for a minute. But
yes.
so we're gonna have about 10 minutes or so for some questions, but before we break to go to more questions and feedback from the audience, did you want to say anything about the women's newspaper that we also discovered? The CCWF stands for Central California Women's Facility, and then they named their newspaper the Paper Trail. Is there anything you
Yeah.
wanted to say about it?
I mean, I did want to say about it. The one thing that I found very interesting was the let me share my screen. Because actually it's really funny, and this reminded me of something. I was at South by Southwest, and we were talking about women's sports and like what somebody just asked for my advice on advertising. And this menopause and renewal reminded me of what I said because I was like, I feel like with women, the one thing I want to know as an athlete is like, when do you change your pad? Like, when do you change your tampon? Like, when do these things happen? So I feel like the idea of talking about women's health is another thing that is often deprived. And I would kind of, if I have time, maybe just like 3 minutes, read an excerpt from that or like the first couple of paragraph or so.
Yes, please, please go for it.
Okay. So One Woman's Journey Through Menopause, and this is by Elizabeth Lozano. It all started with little changes in my body. I thought I was losing my mind. I could not hold on to my to thoughts. The second I thought I was getting better, something else would happen to me. The only consolation I had was going in the shower to let the hot water soothe me as I sobbed. What was happening to me? I had no control over my body, my mental health, my mental state. I've gone through hard times before. I served 30 years after all, but this was different. I seriously thought about taking my own life. This was affecting every aspect of my life. I had exhaustion, brain fog, depression, headaches, and an anxiety roller coaster that went up and down the core of my body that came out of nowhere. That's beautifully written. And let me not forget the furnace I lived in, with the hot flashes and night sweats that felt like I was in my own personal summer burning from the inside out. I wondered at times if this was human combustion and if all that remained of me would be ashes on my bed. At some point, I made up my mind. I wanted to live, but I couldn't keep living like this. I desperately needed to understand what was going on a deeper level. I needed help. Meditation and prayer are something that always facilitated me through hard times, so I turned to that. But I also knew I would need to look outward to medical professionals and my peers. It was March 2020, and due to COVID-19, it took over a year to see an OBGYN at the Central California Women's Facility. Just to confirm, I was, is it perimenopausal?
Yep, exactly.
Oh, perimenopausal. This is a
That's
new
the word that's going
thing.
to haunt you in about 15 years.
And you know what's crazy? Like the reason I wanted to actually read this for myself, and as soon as I started, was like, I feel like the way that people talk about menopause is just like the external things, like the hot flashes. But whoa,
Yeah.
like
Dude, I feel like I'm
whoa,
on that bed burning up with her in her ashes. Like, and I'm like, oh no, is this gonna happen to me? Like, I don't want this to happen to me. Like, give me the medical information. I need it.
yeah. And I've seen my mom is like on the other side of menopause, and I remember her hot flashes and stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, this is whoa, this woman stuff is
Yeah.
so like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I want to leave time for questions too. I did not get that much help through the OBGYN. He wanted to prescribe me birth control pills to assist with the hot flashes and help balance my hormones. I did not want to take the medication because I had heard it could cause cancer, so I continued to suffer in silence. When I spoke to middle-aged women in my building, I came to find out that they did not have any more information about menopause than I did. Everyone I knew had served decades in prison, and no one understood the changes their body was going through. It always came back to them navigating a major life change and figuring out how best they can manage their symptoms on their own, such as with herbal remedies, food, or vitamins that would soften the symptoms. I was sad to know that there was nowhere else to turn. You want me to finish or go to the lifestyle tips?
Yeah, let's talk about the lifestyle tips. So yeah, we're
Okay,
gonna
cool.
put a link in the chat in a little bit so that all y'all out there can read this article too. So the digital versions that I sent to Kelsey, we'll put in the chat so that you can read it too. So no one has to be on a cliff, but yeah, let's talk about the lifestyle tips.
Yeah, I was like, that's a good pausing point, but let's get to something positive for the next to wrap it up. So lifestyle tips. Number one, healthy diet. Foods that are low fat, plant-based, and rich in calcium and soy can help with these hot flashes. Vitamins, calcium, and vitamin D are important for menopausal people. Two, oh, that was two. Three,
Mhm.
exercise. Daily movement helps with menopausal weight gain, very common mood and sleep. Mindfulness. Activities like yoga and meditation can help manage stress. Five, sleep. Nightly routines, bedtimes, and reducing screen time can help with sleep disturbances. Sexual health. Talk to a doctor about vaginal dryness, low libido, and painful sex. Seven, community. Connect with others who are navigating menopause and support and insight. Wow. I feel like these seven tips like should just be 7 tips without life for through life, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
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 Um, but I mean, that just automatically caught my eye because, like, same with menopause. I mean, even menstrual cycles. Both of my sisters have gone through almost 6 pregnancies at this point, and the things that they tell me, whoa, like I didn't know that happened to your body. So I really wanted to read that one.
Right. Yeah. The
Yeah.
women's bodies are so like mystical, but also they're mystical because we don't get the education that we deserve about them. And it's like, I don't know, it's all part of the patriarchy. The but I won't go off on my spiel. But
I feel you because I was like, I have something else to say, but I don't want to even. We're gonna end up having a little mini podcast here if we keep going.
right. Yeah, exactly. Which I'm not mad about that, but we're on the
Either.
timeline, so so we have a lot of great feedback in the chat of people responding to the Valentine's Day special and
Yeah.
saying, indeed, Lori was sharing that she really wants to know who the people are in the photos and what their stories are. And just reminding us that people in prison are human also. And Rachel shares that she got such a different perspective on incarceration, also from the inside of the podcast Ear Hustle.
Hmm.
And Claire says, yeah, the story humanizes people. And when people get out of prison, life is hard. So anything that can help them have a better reentry is a service to society. So I think I have one of our colleagues in the library, Julianne, are you on the call? Do you want to come on camera and ask a couple questions of Kelsey?
Sure,
So this
happy
is
to.
Julianne. She's our small business librarian on the fourth floor, but she follows your
Yeah.
TikTok, so she had some questions for you too. So let me give her the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Kelsey. Nice to meet you.
So nice.
Um, as our Kelsey said, I follow your TikTok. I have quite a few questions for you, but I'll ask two so that other people have time to ask questions. Have any journalists or news organizations reacted to your content in ways that surprised you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the over anytime, especially if I'm talking about a smaller magazine or a smaller newspaper, like even when out of Marfa, Texas, I found like they sent me so much cool merch. So a lot of times I get an overwhelmingly positive reaction, especially from Gen Z journalists. If I read one of their articles, they're like, I'm just so happy. My friends don't even know what I do. So the journalists and then the smaller organizations always have some of the most positive reviews. And I've been invited to places like New York Times has invited me to come to the office. One Chicago paper who I'm still like every time I go to Chicago, I forget to reach back out. But yeah, going into offices, I've been able to go to like the last printing press left in Long Island and like actually see how the papers are printed and they like printed one with my face on it. So that was really cool.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. So you have shared in a previous TikTok video that you come from a family of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I believe you shared your grandpa started his own business when he was 16.
Yes.
So coming from a background of entrepreneurship, I'm curious how that background has shaped your approach to building your brand as a content creator, as Print Princess, and
Yeah.
developing authentic partnerships with news organizations and other brands.
Oh, I love that question. So I think like the first thing when my videos went viral, my dad asked like, "Okay, so how you gonna make money? Like, how are you gonna make money from this?" I'm like, "Okay, just give me a second, let me figure this out." But I think what it's really made me think differently is I don't just think of myself as like a content creator, right? Like I do read the newspaper, but what I figured, and I do put my camera down and do that. But what I've realized is that, like any entrepreneur, you're always looking for the gaps. Like, where is there a gap in society? And where can I either offer a service or make a product to fill that gap? And I think right now, what we're facing is that, the generation that actually reads the physical print is on their way, they're transitioning out of life. They're dealing with ailments that might not allow them to read the way the paper is printed. So I think what I've been able to do is offer a service to a lot of newspapers, but also just educational companies of how can we make education like sexy? How can we make it interesting? How can we make sure that in the midst of somebody's 30-minute brain rot on TikTok, that they come across something that sparks something new in their mind. So I think entrepreneurship makes me think of what I'm doing is more of a service to society, something that I can, that can be a business. But also we're just like we're missing some, like I think we're trying to figure out what to do with media. Um and and obviously these legacy institutions, I'm holding up the New York Times, they've had a lot of problems. Like they are not perfect by any means. The barrier to entry into these spaces is so large. But they still have a purpose in media, in the media landscape. And I think that fully rejecting them and throwing them out isn't quite the answer. I think that they need to learn how to adjust to what people are seeking in media. And I think I've been able to kind of provide a bridge for that. So that's where my mindset has always been, is like, all right, cool, make the video, but what bigger are you going to offer?
Thanks for jumping in, Julianne. Appreciate it. So we have just a couple more minutes, but I want to hear from you about First Stop News and also your ideas about how to get the younger generation engaged in news.
Yeah. So First Stop News is a show that I co-host. It is through Youth Media International, which is a small nonprofit media company. And their goal is to really get news to kids 8 through 12, because they're like one of the hardest targets to reach. So that has given me a lot of experience of producing, writing, editing, and also just giving me on-camera time that I never would have had. So that's really cool. But a new project that I have coming out that I'm super excited about is I've been working on a long form digital series that I have decided I'm actually going to live stream on Twitch as well and YouTube, because the kids love the live. Like they want to see you doing everything. And that's actually going to be called Chronicled. Because the newspaper.
Love
And
it.
it,
Great name. Love it. Yeah.
yeah, love it. And it has to be with the K, 'cause that's my name. So yeah, Chronicled is gonna be my new digital series. Stay on the lookout for that throughout the spring. Um, and I'm really excited. It's going to be more so of a news roundup, kind of teaching media literacy skills. And, I thank you all for giving me this opportunity, because it's going to look a little bit like this, of live readings, of explaining my process, and really interacting with my audience on like a live basis versus posting the video and seeing their comments and having to wait. So this kind of gave me the practice that I needed to, be get like to actually, I think the practice that I needed during my recordings, because they've been a little not my favorite. But you kind of gave me the space to be natural, so I really appreciate it.
Cool. Yay. We're helping you on your
Yeah,
journey and
you
you're
are.
you're you're doing like the really good work out there. And I'll just say we have tons of love coming in for you from the
I
chat right
appreciate
now. Also, I'll say someone, Janae Brown, shared that she loves your energy and that she
it.
wants you to bring your energy to our library conferences. So, our big library conference of the year is the American Library Association
Yeah,
annual conference. This year it's in Philadelphia in June. And then we
yeah.
also have the California Library Association. So, hashtag Print Princess, maybe we'll see if we can get you into one of those spaces because, like, you're really like connecting with librarians out there. So, we'll,
Oh,
yeah.
shout out to y'all. Like shout out to the librarians. That's I'm like very underrated, and need more in society too. I don't think young people know, like, do that. Please be a
And we're
librarian.
cool too. We're not all like the ones
Yeah.
going around being like, shh, like I'm the one that patrons are telling me to shut up because I'm so loud. So it's like some of us are cool too. But
Yeah.
thank you so much, Kelsey. Thank you for your generosity and sharing with us and all your tips and coming on to our San Francisco Public Library virtual library. And have a great rest of your day and good luck with the future. We'll definitely be watching you as you bring out your new long form series. So yeah, can't wait.
Thank you so much. And then also, can I drop my email here just in case anybody wants to reach out?
Please do. Yes.
Okay, great, great, great. I'll drop my email. And thank you all for listening today. And thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, our absolute pleasure. Absolutely.
Okay. All righty.
There it is, kelcrust at
Yeah.
gmail.com.
All righty. Y'all take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.